Over the course of the 2010s, The Walking Dead cemented itself as a show unafraid to explore humanity down to its ugliest roots. Nearly every possible form of villainy was pushed to its limits, and we ended up with some truly terrifying results. Whether it's the monster within your own group slowly tearing it apart like Shane, the brutal psychological domination of someone you can't overpower like Negan, or today's subject, a charming backroom backstabber barely holding on to reality, the Governor. Unlike many other villains in the show, the Governor isn't written to be liked or even particularly relatable. That means we don't have to spend time arguing over every decision he makes, but instead we can focus on dissecting his worldview. Was he wrong? Was he right? And ultimately, can we actually sympathize with him? Now, long question answered short. If we were discussing the comic book Governor, the answer would be a resounding no. So we're keeping this strictly to the TV show adaptation. The Governor, real name Philip Blake, isn't just a villain, he's almost a political system in human form. Where others scattered for survival, Philip rebuilt a semblance of former humanity. Woodbury was a small tight-knit survivor settlement housing over 70 people at its peak. It ran like many other functioning hubs, trading, bartering, maintaining food and water supplies, offering protection to guarantee safety. This is where the Governor gets elevated from a random villain to more of a real-life caricature, and it's honestly surprising how many people miss this. Countries, cities, towns, and villages don't just run forever. They run into issues with supply, manpower, maintaining order, and defending themselves. Leaders, through small decisions that build over time, eventually face backlash that risks their position. The same applies here, and the Governor's answer, like in many real-life cases, is to become an iron-fisted dictator. He loosens who counts toward that manpower pool and begins adopting a means-justify-the-ends mindset. Although not always directly shown, Philip is deeply unstable. He grew up in an abusive household, ruled over by a father who wasn't afraid to get physical. He viewed opposing such authority as pointless, leading him to see heroes as fools who only bring harm upon themselves. You can probably see where this is going. Combining these two ideas gives us a clear outcome. Philip was raised under violent control, and now that he has power, he seeks to control others in the same way. Dark, but very realistic. When Michonne angers the Woodbury community by killing soldiers and then joins Rick's group, it sets off the chain reaction we see in the show. Philip realizes these failures can reflect poorly on him, so he recruits the brash and deeply unstable Merle. Step 1. Expanding the manpower pool. Then he begins propagandizing his people, telling them comforting lies and painting Rick's group as clear villains to justify his revenge-driven actions. This manifests in several ways, most notably capturing Glenn and Maggie, torturing them, and even getting disturbingly close to Maggie. This perceived back and forth leads exactly where most unstable dictators end up, preparing for war. Fear strengthens power, but it also gives people a clear purpose. A collective goal helps distract from internal issues, and Philip has plenty of those. Whether it's his collection of walker-heads or his chained-up undead daughter, it's clear that abuse, loss, and paranoia are all catching up to him. It's one of the main reasons he rejects Andrea's attempt at mediation, and why even Rick speaking to him directly doesn't work. By this point, it's more beneficial for him to go to war than to back down. It's no longer just strategic, it's personal. So he launches an aggressive assault on the prison. And remember this, the war isn't just about supplies, it's about belief and control over his own people, as well as a deep hatred for Michonne. And he fails. But that failure alone isn't what ends Woodbury, it's his reaction to it. With their collective goal collapsing, Woodbury quickly becomes a lost cause. There's nothing holding the community together anymore, and the Governor knows his authority is about to be questioned, so he turns on his own people. Whether it's out of anger or because he genuinely believes they failed him doesn't really matter. He massacres them and burns Woodbury to the ground before disappearing. If you're not already seeing it, the Governor is a near perfect allegory for ideological collapse. His entire purpose is to bring politics into the apocalypse, something reinforced early on when Rick declares this isn't a democracy anymore. And like many fallen leaders who survive their downfall, this isn't the end for Philip. He briefly appears as if he might change, but in reality, the bitterness eats away at him. It further radicalizes his mindset, and he repeats the same cycle with a new group, eventually ending up back at the prison. This time, the governor is ready to go down with the ship. Rick offers peace, but the governor only remembers humiliation. So he executes Herschel, igniting another war. Even as the battle drags on, he pushes far beyond reason. His goal isn't survival anymore, it's Rick's death. And he nearly succeeds, until Michonne stabs him through the chest. And there, in the collapsing remnants of his influence, he dies brutally. His so-called army quickly falls apart, with some even joining Rick's group later on. And for the second and final time, the governor's ideology fails. With his story fully laid out, along with his motivations and the inevitability of his actions, we're left with a few key questions. The most important being, was the governor wrong? Yes, completely. With or without walkers, the governor is a textbook dictator who cannot sustain peace or stability long term. His personal motivations combined with limited resources make collapse inevitable. Instead of honesty or openness like Rick, he relies on propaganda and a collectivist mindset, creating enemies and goals to justify his rule. And the key to that system is simple. It only works if you keep winning. Like Negan later in the series, domination-based groups must continuously consume resources and labor to survive. The governor, unlike Negan, is far too mentally unstable and clouded by emotion. He chooses battles that make no sense and launches attacks on heavily fortified positions like the prison. And unlike Negan, he doesn't want a share, he wants total destruction. That only guarantees resistance. He was practically ensuring his own downfall. Anyone arguing that the governor was a good leader or could have succeeded is missing the point the show is making. In fact, most of the arguments used to defend him apply far more cleanly to Negan's system, even though both are deeply flawed. The second question is simpler. Does the governor deserve sympathy? Michonne attacking his men isn't his fault, but the way he responds is. He uses the situation to consolidate power rather than be honest with his people. He spreads fear instead of truth. His backstory is tragic and it explains his mindset, but it doesn't excuse it. What could justify 2 aggressive wars and the massacre of your own people? The key thing to understand is that the governor had reasons. No one denies that. But those reasons don't justify full-scale war. People often say he had an excuse, but then apply it to completely irrational actions. What about diplomacy, trade, cooperation? If your default answer is total war, then that excuse falls apart instantly. In the end, the governor represents a very real and historically accurate type of dictator. A harsh upbringing, a rise to power, and a personal struggle turned into everyone else's problem. He's written almost perfectly. His flaws, his decisions, and his downfall are so grounded in reality that you were probably thinking of real-world dictators while watching. And that's the true purpose of his character, to take someone like that and place them into the apocalypse. What happens next? Look no further than Philip Blake. This video, as well as all of my others, would not be possible without my members. Skog, Wizard Elf, Eternal Canadian, Fresh Pokemon Hunter, Ross Mo, Donnie, Poopinsock, Beatbox Blade, Alexander Brantley, Jojo My Dojo, Thy Oasis, Hitomi Buckfink 777, Chesburger, Weiss Belladonna, Xavier the God, HL2GOAE, Elva, Freezing Dice, Fran Senpai Reacts, Absolute Sin, Rowan Lee, Nicholas Paradise, Tilda Anderson, Celine, Toby, Jake Brown, N/A, The Wrangler, Basspat, Ricky C, Amiko Teke, Nightfell, Callan, Janhut, Felix, Mucky, Hydro Ryu, Heart of Angel, Sawblade, The Wise DAC, I'm Z, Fakustrak ARG, and Drago. Thank you so much for your support, and I really hope anybody who watched this far loved the video. Thank you.